It seems like I have to keep bugging you guys about watching Showa Genroku Rakugo Shinjuu. The second season is the 16th highest rated thing of all time on my anime list, which actually puts it in 10th place if you condense all of Gintama into one item. And that's kind of crazy when you consider that only 30,000 people on there have actually bothered to watch it. I have been dying to properly analyze this series ever since it first started airing, but that's kind of hard to justify doing from a business perspective for something that so few people are talking about or even know exists. Fortunately, Bookwalker has come to my rescue by agreeing to sponsor this video. Bookwalker, if you're not familiar, is Kadokawa's official ebook store where you can find thousands of English-language manga and light novels, Rakugo Shinjuu included. In fact, from now until the 17th of April, the first volume of the manga is on sale for just 620 yen. And Bookwalker has given me a coupon that will take 600 yen off any book that you order from their store, which means that if you enter the code BASEMENT at checkout, you can get Descending Stories Showa Genroku Rakugo Shinjuu for just 18 cents. Now, it's worth clarifying that this will only work for email addresses that have signed up after March 21st, because they're trying to bring in new customers with this promotion, so you will need to sign up for a new account to use this coupon. But you can use it to get literally anything on their store, and right now Ace of the Diamond, Chihayafuru, and a ton of other great manga are on sale for the same price, so it's definitely worth the hassle. Obviously, I think that you should use that code to read Showa Genroku Rakugo Shinjuu. I also think, more importantly, that you should watch Showa Genroku Rakugo Shinjuu because this anime is absolutely spellbinding. The direction, use of sound, and editing blow every other anime that you can watch free for 30 days at crunchyroll.com/basement out of the water. This show excels at just about everything it does, and maybe the most impressive things about it are the Rakugo performances themselves. Today we're going to be taking a look at one from the first episode. This is the scene that made me fall in love with the series, and I'm hoping that by explaining why it hit me so hard, I can convince a few more of you to give it a shot. In service of that, I'll be keeping this spoiler-free past this point in the episode. But the scene in question does require some backstory for context. The series opens cold on a convict signing his papers to get out of a Japanese prison. For the last year of his incarceration, he's been driven by one ambition: to become the apprentice of Yakumo, a legendary Rakugo performer. Despite having never taken an apprentice, something about this ex-criminal intrigues Yakumo. He takes him in under the stage name Yotaro, Rakugo slang for fool, and begins training him. At first, Yotaro sucks and mostly works as Yakumo's assistant, but slowly, through the help of Yakumo's adopted daughter Konatsu, he begins improving. Still, as she says to him while he's stumbling his way through a rehearsal of Dekigokuro, or a spur-of-the-moment thing as it translates to in English, he's lacking. He has no hook for the audience beyond simply speaking to them. He needs to make some sort of breakthrough in order to create truly worthwhile Rakugo, and at this moment, his old boss shows up to offer him a job. Now, there's a lot going on in this scene that's worth acknowledging, but I'll keep it brief so that we can get to the meat of this analysis. As soon as the boss shows up, he starts calling Yotaro by his real name, Kyoji. This is the first time we've heard this name, so it seems strange to us. It's an off-putting reminder of a past for this character that we've never seen. It's also a sign of the boss's disrespect for Rakugo as an art form and Yotaro's desire to pursue it as a career. Every time he uses this name, and he uses it a lot in this scene, he's attacking Rakugo, saying, "This isn't who you really are." This comes across in the staging as well. The house interior is framed within the frame like a stage and represents the world of Rakugo, whereas everything beyond the door is the outside world. The boss has stepped onto the porch to drag Yotaro back out of that world. He leaves his feet in the real world, but while Yotaro is framed at the edge of the stage, he never steps off it. It's a very uncomfortable scene, which the unsettling music cues us into before Yotaro is aware of it. At first, the boss is greeted with smiles, but those fade as his intent becomes clear, and the music ramps up in intensity as his tone becomes more menacing, before cutting out as he breaks the tension by shouting at Konatsu. This makes us expect a turning point, which the boss prompts by asking Yotaro to speak up, but instead he reaffirms his desire to perform as a Rakugo storyteller. Then Yakumo enters the scene with a more whimsical musical cue. His appearance totally changes the direction of this scene. It eases Yotaro's mind and removes any hesitation he might have. Immediately, the camera shifts so that he's framed entirely within the house while his boss sits outside it, clearly an intruder. As Yakumo sits down to talk, he steps into the light and takes Konatsu's place as a buffer between Yotaro and the boss. He's serving the same role that Konatsu did, but his confidence allows him to do so with a screen presence equal to that of the boss, rather than as a voice in the background. When he tells Yotaro to get ready for the show, the boss's face is shadowed, his presence diminished. From this point forward, all eyes in the scene are on Yakumo. Yotaro immediately steps off the porch, crossing the threshold back into the world of Rakugo. Yakumo sees an opportunity here to motivate his student to improve. By telling him that his boss will be in the audience, Yakumo creates a scenario where Yotaro has no choice but to get better. And as we're about to see, it works. Vitally, the show gives us a metric by which to judge this improvement in an earlier scene where Yotaro is watching and praising his teacher. He draws attention to Yakumo's ability to pull the audience into his world and the way that he embodies different characters through his acting. So as an audience, we naturally look for these aspects and qualities in the next performance. And for an anime, it's really incredible how well they're conveyed. As an art form, Rakugo is all about using subtle body language and vocal cues to transform into different characters within a very limited space. This is kind of the opposite of what anime typically does best, which is big, exaggerated actions executed by easily identifiable and broadly defined characters. It's the kind of thing that you need to see live to really get it. Yet through clever camera work and editing and some of the best vocal work and sound editing in anime, Rakugo Shinjuu manages to put you in the theater with the performers. The performances in this anime are just as hilarious, dramatic, and hypnotizing as they would be if you were watching them live. I could watch a whole season of these characters just telling stories. They're that good. But what's amazing is that they're never the only stories that the show is telling. The characters on stage and in the audience always have something else going on in their lives, and that bleeds into the performance. It informs how they take it in as they watch it from the audience. The show makes these stories feel like other people in the audience are whispering them to each other at the periphery of your attention, but it also makes sure that you never miss a beat in the plot. It's a delicate balancing act to maintain, and it's executed flawlessly in Yotaro's performance. The scene proper jumps right into the start of Yotaro's performance with two quick establishing shots of the theater, followed by a slow tilt up his back as he waits to go on. We see that what the boss has said is still playing in his mind, and in a few artful shots we see that the pressure is weighing heavily on him. His feet are shaky as he steps onto the stage, and he's trapped inside his own head, as is shown by the first-person camera. He's so caught up in his own thoughts that he trips. He plays it off as a regular part of his opening act, which gets the audience laughing, but the boss is unimpressed. He knows him well enough to know that the fall wasn't part of the act at all. The pratfall distracts him from his worries a bit, expanding his awareness a little beyond his own field of view. But we can see that he's still panicking because the camera stays focused entirely on him, only cutting away once to his unamused boss, the source of his anxiety, as he worriedly scans the audience to see what he's thinking. It's only when he takes a breath to psych himself up that we finally see the other characters, who are likewise worried for him, and the music ramps down to reflect the calming of his mind. By the time the performance starts, it's stopped entirely. Yotaro's introduction goes well, but as he launches into the story, it causes Konatsu to panic, since this is Dekigokuro, the set that he was struggling with just a few hours earlier. Still, he starts strong. Within the first few lines, the audience is chuckling, and his version of the boss and thief from the story gets an immediate laugh out of his old boss. This goal accomplished, our attention shifts to the rest of the audience. The show makes sure to show us a packed Rakugo hall watching Yakumo before this scene happens to give context for how small this crowd is. But everyone in the audience is enjoying themselves, and Yotaro seemingly has a few fans among the regulars. As the laughter picks up, it grabs Yotaro's attention and fuels his confidence, which is shown brilliantly in this shot where the laughter gets louder as we zoom in on his ear. This is a very simple shot, but the combination of smart sound design and simple camera work allows us to instantly understand his state of mind. I won't go into the minutia of the story here, mainly because it's a great routine with jokes that I can only ruin by breaking them down, but take note of the way that they convey Yotaro's performances. As he begins slipping into the different characters, the show cuts to different angles to emphasize the differences between them and make the conversation feel more natural in a filmic sense. The boss relaxes his posture and really starts laughing after the first round of jokes. Konatsu notices this, which eases her worries, and in turn, her reassuring smile is a subconscious cue to us as the audience that everything is going to be okay. From this moment on, we're free to simply enjoy the story. And we do. For nearly 2.5 minutes, the show just lets this performance play out, refusing to cut back to the audience because it wants us to get just as caught up in the story as they are. It works, too. Yotaro's telling of the story is really funny, even if some of the nuance is lost in translation from Japanese. This scene always manages to get me laughing. It's so spellbinding that it actually makes it hard for me to pause and scan individual shots for detail. I just want to keep watching whenever I hit play. The scene does eventually start cutting away to people in the audience in order to emphasize the impact that the performance is having on them. The people working backstage have stopped what they're doing to enjoy the story. Konatsu is mouthing along to the words in perfect time with Yotaro's delivery. She's back on edge because it's coming up on the lines that he flubbed in rehearsal. Now, this layer of tension could take us out of this story, but the show uses a bit of dramatic irony to reassure us that it's going to be okay. As Yotaro gets into the funniest parts of his routine, this bombastic, jazzy music picks up in the background, rolling drums mimicking the waves of laughter rolling through the crowd. An important rule of good filmmaking is that the music should almost never lie to the audience. Music does a lot to dictate your emotional response to a scene, so it can, and should, be used to prime the audience for what's coming next. This rowdy jazz track makes us feel comfortable laughing where silence would not. We still see the points where Yotaro struggles a bit, emphasized by his hair being a little frayed and a bead of sweat rolling down his neck. But as long as the music keeps going, we know that he's not going to miss a beat. And this nervous energy actually ends up bolstering his performance, which is often the case for real-world theater performers. Being totally relaxed is almost as bad for an actor's performances as being a nervous wreck. The constant laughing of the audience also allows the show to punctuate the transitions between characters with sound rather than hard cuts. A burst of laughter creates a clear distinction between the characters, where at the start of the performance that was a little bit more lacking. We see Yotaro improving before our eyes. We also see his focus shift from his boss to the performance. In this wide shot of the audience, his boss is obscured behind his name card. This is especially impressive because they don't cheat to do this. They constantly keep track of which characters sit where in the scene and place the camera accordingly in order to get the meaning out of it that they want. It's the little details like that, the things that could easily be missed or simply fudged in the animation process, that make an anime's world feel believable. The story climaxes in a gutbuster of a joke which the director chooses to punctuate with a funny camera movement that follows Yotaro's hand. This weird little zoom out makes the surprise of his goofy face all the funnier. The camera doesn't move often in this scene, and when it does, it only does so in service of the narrative. At least part of this stage is a 3D model, so they could be doing a lot of wild camera movements, but the animators chose to restrain themselves and only move the camera when it's absolutely necessary, not just because they can. Handshakers and a lot of other shitty anime could learn a thing or two from this. This joke gets the whole audience roaring with laughter, and this is the only part of the whole routine where we actually break from the story to let that laughter play out. And the camera work here is very deliberate. Even though the audience is empty, placing the camera in front of this guy fills the whole screen with laughing faces. The mirth spills out into the peanut gallery as well. Through these shots, and of course solid sound design, the production team creates the sensation of laughter filling this relatively empty room. Notably, Yakumo is the only person with a straight face in the whole audience. Even the boss is smirking and clearly enjoying himself. Konatsu still seems to be worried because she hasn't seen Yotaro perform this part correctly today, but the music keeps going so we know that we're safe to laugh. With the big laugh out of the way, the audience calms down for a minute while Yotaro runs through the rest of the story. There's no laughter, but a pan across the entire audience shows that it's not for lack of enjoyment. Every member of the audience is smiling wide and has their eyes locked on the performer. There are even fewer cuts now, but the difference between all three characters is now crystal clear to us, and a few of these still shots are really brilliant. The show manages to create the impression of an over-the-shoulder shot just from how Yotaro turns his head. When he finally gets to the joke that the story was named for, the audience starts laughing again, and for the first time we see the boss guffawing out loud. The way that his head jerks back and the guy on the other side jerks forward draws our eyes to Yakumo in the middle, who we see is now smiling. Naturally, we wonder what he's thinking. We get the answer as his voice overwhelms the buildup of the last joke of the performance. Knowing the timing of this story exactly, he chooses this moment to grab the boss's attention, pointing out that he asked one good question earlier while talking to Yotaro on the porch. Why did he choose Rakugo? In telling the joke on stage, Yotaro also answers this question. Now, on its own, this is a spectacular joke that ties the two threads of the story, the lying renter and the pathetic thief, together into one complete package. It's funny not just because it's an absurd thing for the renter to say, but because he's stealing his excuse for stealing his landlord's description of his nice futon. It calls back to like 4 different jokes at once. This is absolutely brilliant writing. But more brilliantly, it also ties the story of what's going on in the audience to the story of what's going on stage, and in so doing, it connects all of the different narrative threads of the scene together, allowing us to see what it's fully about. In The Thief, we see who Yotaro was. Through Yakumo's comments, we see who he wants to be and how he decided to pursue that. And in his performance, we see a snapshot of his gradual evolution as an artist. We're never given many specifics about Yotaro, but this one scene tells us everything that we will ever need to know about who he is. It also hints at Konatsu seeing a little of her father in him and shows us that he was weirdly lucky in his choice of adopted father figures. Neither is perfect, but in their own way, both care for him. Yakumo enough to be invested in his development, and the boss enough to let him go. With whimsical flute music playing, Yotaro rushes out to greet his boss after the performance, only to find that he's gone. But rather than being disappointed, he's excited to know that he made him laugh. For all the complexity of this scene, his goal was always simple, and he accomplished it. Yakumo is proud of him, and both Matsuda and Konatsu are smiling, although she's turning her head in a weak attempt to hide it. It's a heartwarming moment. And of course, for the sake of juxtaposition, that needs to be followed by just a touch of darkness. In the car ride home, Yakumo and Konatsu reflect on why they're both so drawn to Yotaro, that he reminds them of Konatsu's dead father, Sukeroku. This is what connects this performance to the broader plot of the show and gives it significance. The idea that somehow Yotaro summons up the same atmosphere in the theater as Sukeroku did. But it's also important that this revelation comes after the performance. Now, both Yakumo and Konatsu know very firmly who Yotaro is, yet they still get that Sukeroku vibe from him. There's not a lot that needs analyzing here, it mainly sets us up for future conflicts, and I'm already running close to 20 minutes, so I think it's time to call it a day. Showa Genroku Rakugo Shinjuu is so dense with meaning that I could create a series twice as long as the show just picking it apart. But outside of covering the OPs in the nearish future, I'm probably not going to do that. Still, this show is a modern masterpiece. It deserves its place in the annals of anime history, and I hope that I've managed to convey even a fraction of that brilliance to you today. If this, or any of my other gushing about the series, has piqued your interest, you can watch it for free for 30 days along with everything else on Crunchyroll by signing up for a free trial at crunchyroll.com/basement. And if you're already a Rakugo fan or you just prefer reading, remember that you can pick up the first volume of the equally brilliant manga for just 18 cents by signing up for Bookwalker before April 17th and entering the promo code BASEMENT at checkout to get 600 yen off your purchase. And even after that sale is over, you can still get it or any other manga or light novel for dirt cheap using that code. And you can read it on your phone, your tablet, or your computer, whatever you choose and feel comfortable with. Links in the doobly-doo for all of that, and thank you to anyone who uses that coupon, especially to buy Rakugo. Showing your love for the series by buying the manga tells the publisher that it's worth promoting, and using that coupon really helps out the channel. On that note, what helps out most of all is the support that you guys give me on Patreon. It gives me a stable budget to work with, and without that, nothing I do would be possible. I really can't thank you guys enough for that, especially the top donors whose names you're seeing on screen right now. I really appreciate everything that you guys have done for me, and to show that, I'm going to be revamping my patron tiers and the Mother's Basement Discord very soon so that all of you get more in exchange for your help. If you're new to the channel and you want to hear me talk about something else, then click right up here to see whatever it is that Google thinks is best for you. Leave a comment below letting me know what that is, because that would actually help me understand how this algorithm works. Or you can click down here to watch me talk about why Rakugo Shinjuu is my anime of the year for 2016. But if this is the last that you see of me today, then I'm Geoff Thew, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement.